Hey everyone, Depressed Eeyore here. I'm the GM for this 5th edition little session campaign thing that I've been doing. It's been over for quite a while, but the videos have been just trickling in. And unfortunately, two of my videos had some issues, which happened to be the last two videos. So I'm just going to kind of summarize what happened and kind of just give a little bit of closure to this little series. Overall, the purpose of this entire thing was just to teach 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to a few friends and show it off and show how great it is. For those who don't know or didn't realize, I took the a advanced Dungeons & Dragons session, or a 2nd edition pre-made campaign known as the Shattered Circle, and I converted it to 5th edition. It was pretty fun to convert. It wasn't too bad. There was, of course, a few kinks here and there, but it was pretty fun, and drawing the map was a lot of fun as well. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and just talk about what happened. Where we last left off, the party had arrived at the final room. They saw essentially what is known, what they later on will find out is the Founding Stone, which is that giant stone skull with the symbol of affinity clutched between its teeth. And it's glowing and all that powerful stuff. And there was also Colum himself, who is one of those chitin things, those spider people. And he was trying to, he just talked about how wonderful the stone was and how he kind of found it, and he was like, hey, this thing's amazing. He tells him like all sorts of things, which is kind of what the stone does. And he was trying to get other party members to touch it. But I don't believe anyone actually attempted to touch it, and instead they decided to, eventually it kind of broke down, and eventually combat happened, which was expected to happen. This was supposed to be the final boss room type thing. As for Callum himself, he was a 6th level, I think he was like a 5th or 6th level fighter with the champion archetype. So he had a little bit of extra crits. He critted on 19s and 20s, not that it mattered. He was equipped with a very powerful ice sword known as the Ice Razor, which was in the original campaign, the original module, but I had to adjust it for 5th edition. And let's see if I can actually pull up his stats. I actually went and grabbed my notes so I can try to remember some of this. It's been a very long time since I've actually ran this, so I don't really have it memorized anymore. So yeah, Ice Razor, which was, it did, looks like it did an additional, I think it was a +1 longsword with an additional 2d6 cold, and if it ever did a natural 20, it would do the effect of a sword of wounding. Because what will happen is essentially the blades are made out of ice and it's constantly melting and reforming. And whenever you get a natural 20 with it, a shard of ice would break off inside the person and they would take additional damage for 1d10 rounds. So it's pretty unique. As for everything else, he used one-handed weapon. All his armor was natural armor, and he got wrecked very, very quickly. The party finally, around the time they fought those wraiths, they kind of realized that their party composition was very, very strong at single target focused damage, because they had so much spellcasting. They had a cleric, they had a wizard, and a sorcerer, and Johnny also hit pretty hard as well. So it was just a lot of focused damage. And so what ended up happening essentially was, they had, you had a sorcerer that can do a quicken spell and just blast with 6 searing rays, and then you had Varus's 3 searing rays, and they blew him apart. They practically just punched holes through him, burning holes through him, and he fell to the ground. But while that happened, the stone was still glowing and grinding, and just seemed to be kind of grinning throughout the entire combat. Colin was slowly regenerating, though I didn't really mention that until it popped up a second time and started hacking through people. For the most part, Callum didn't really get more than 1 or 2 strikes in before he just kind of got taken down again. He did heavily wound, what was his name? Clinker. And, took him down, but he got healed up. Also, throughout the battle, it was like 10 rounds or so, a random monster would spawn, just be brought into existence by the Founding Stone, which is why this dinosaur is here. But they managed to take that down pretty quickly, and they eventually caught on that they were supposed to cover up the Founding Stone with earth and stuff like that. So they kind of just did that, and for the most part, they kind of had everything under control. I didn't really speed up the combat. I kept on doing it round by round just to kind of keep tension going. But for the most part, they had it very, very well under control. They had so much single target DPS that it was pretty trivial. Probably the way to make him harder was if I had given Column a shield and get his AC up a bit. That would have given him an 18 AC, which would have made him a little bit tankier. And pretty much that's it. Column can also transform into a spider because the Founding Stone turned him into a were spider, but I didn't really need to do that. In the second edition rules, Column in his spider form, his poison was instant death, which was a bit pretty crazy for a first through third level adventure. But that's kind of why I picked this adventure, because this adventure had quite a wide range of difficulty and different monsters to fight from, ranging from goblin-like spider creatures to gibbering mouthers to a unicorn to everything. And in transitioning that to 5th edition actually worked out rather well, because I got to show off the differences between like small, fast enemies to big, high HP but low AC monsters, and even got to show off a boss legendary type creature, which was the unicorn. But anyway, they took out Callum, they covered up the stone. They kind of was like, okay, well, once the stone was covered up, all the energy stopped, nothing was glowing anymore, everything was pretty much pitch black. So they kind of just, used light spells and all that stuff, and they kind of just made their way out, and they kind of made their report to the village. And the idea would have been they would have eventually had to do something about the stone and all that good stuff. But for the most part, I went ahead and called that the end of the session, because I didn't really have any intention on continuing the campaign from there. At that point, I kind of just gave some additional information that they didn't really catch on and stuff they missed. So I guess I'll go over some of the stuff they missed. Let's see if I can remember some of this. Most of the stuff they missed was on the first floor. By the way, all this stuff I drew by hand. For the most part, drawing stuff that was that were like rectangles and stuff that were grid based was very easy. I just kind of compared it to the map that was already on there, because it was also on a grid. But in the case of the map that was all rocky, what I did was I brought the image, I scanned the image of the map, and I put it on here, and then I traced over it. And that's kind of how I made the maps for this. Anyway, so for the first level of this dungeon, They missed 2 traps, because I actually kind of kept track of how many traps since Varus was the one that kept setting off traps, it was kind of amusing to see if he would set off every trap in the dungeon. He missed 2. There was one here, on this door, that was the dragon door that had the smoke coming out. If anyone tried to pick it or force the door open, it would have spewed out poison gas, and that would have been a trap. Also, no one ever attempted to plug up the holes to prevent make the mist go away, so the place was always obscured. Over here, where there was the living quarters for that Chitin tribe, there was one spot that was a hidden location, but no one actually succeeded in their investigation checks. But if they had succeeded, there was a spear trap. If they had tried to open it, and inside would have been some stuff, usually, but all the stuff that was actually supposed to be here got taken with the tribe when they fled. Speaking of this tribe, all the Chitins in this game, in this session, were lawful evil. Every single one of them, except maybe Column. Actually, Column was neutral evil. But for the most part, everyone was lawful evil, and but, I mean, one of the things I kind of told the party was, just because they are aligned evil doesn't mean you can just go and slaughter people. As good or neutral aligned characters, you really should show some restraint about combat, or even try parlaying with the enemy to find a peaceful way to resolve the issue. It was possible to communicate with these people, but only a couple of specific characters actually knew how to speak common. The rest of the people can only speak their spidery speech, and they also knew Drow sign language, which unfortunately no one picked Drow as their race, so no one had Drow sign language. But essentially, since Varus was the one that kind of blasted the initial guards in the face and kind of just started the combat, it kind of just went any chance of parlaying with this group would have didn't happen. They could have done some talking. They could have maybe figured out some ways to get them food and a place to live, and that would have gotten them some bonus experience as well as some okay rewards. Some of the loot they missed was actually they missed out on a +1 shield, and I think some potions and some other stuff, maybe some jewels and all that stuff. But overall, they kind of handled it. Also, I think I put too many chitin in this room. This was more because of how I was reading the encounters for this for rooms 9 and 10. Because of the way it's worded, one of the things it implies is if you fight in room 9, the stuff in room 10 moves over. The like 10 chitin would come from room 10, and then if you look at room 10, it says that there are 10 chitins in there as well. I kind of took that as that there's 20, and then 10 would come in from that room if you fight at room 9 for long enough, and then eventually more will come, but overall, it wasn't too bad. I mean, even though they really bitched about it so when I originally did it, I cut out some of the bitching they did. But for the most part, they slaughtered a majority of them rather easily because they had spells, and spells are rather powerful in this game. Also, they had really good heavy hitters, and they had a very strong tank. The issue was the only reason they didn't do so well was because their healer kept going to the front and got pulverized. And I ended up cutting out a part where I kind of just skewed it and allowed him to live. Because what ended up happening was, what's his name? Nazmir. Nazmir fell, and when you fall, you have to do death checks. And he actually failed every single death check, and the party tried to do heal checks, and no one had a healer's kit, and no one was proficient in like medicine and stuff like that. So no one could pass the checks. They had no healing, nothing, and he essentially was supposed to die. I went ahead and just said, okay, I'm just going to say he stabilized, because it was pretty early, and I didn't really want Nazmir to go through another character, to go and make a new character. And it was kind of amusing just to see how many times Nazmir would charge into the front and get himself wrecked, like in the underwater sections. So yeah, that was pretty much it for that. I mean, as far as like parlaying without everything else, there were some parlay options for the second floor if they happened to aggro the entire Spider City, but they didn't. They actually made their sneak checks. That was actually a good opportunity to show off group skill checks, which I think 5th edition does a really good job with, because in other games it's usually not that good because it's all individuals. So usually it's like, okay, you have a party of a bunch of rogues and a paladin in full plate, and it's like, okay, well, that paladin either has to sit back and do nothing, or get really, really lucky on his checks in order to sneak with the rest of the group. But in the case of a party check, which they included in 5th edition, you can actually have the successes of the rogues help bolster the help correct the errors of the paladin's failed checks or something like that. But enough of that about that. So that was pretty much it for the parlay stuff. I don't think they missed any rooms. They did miss one room, I think. Yeah, they did. They missed the Avery. They missed the place that had the web birds, which is probably for their benefit because they would have just exploded if they had found the Avery. But yeah, there's like a place where they kind of they use the web birds for food and stuff, and there was essentially a giant Avery, and there would have been an infinite amount of birds killed there. But they never went to room 45, which I believe that's the room that was in question, because they had explored all the way up to the mummy up here at room 44. Then they went back up the stairs and went up down. Then they came back in through this direction, and then they never reached room 45. So they missed one room. I think they missed a few secret doors, but not many. I think they missed a few of the secret doors in room 66, maybe. No, actually, I think they got them all because they were very thorough at that point because they kind of got the gist of it. As for Johnny still suffered from nightmares because he was still carrying those black shards that Nazmir picked up. Nazmir got those black shards, put it in the cooking pot, and Johnny was the one carrying the cooking pot. And so that's why Johnny was suffering nightmares every time he went to sleep, which led to him to being frightened for 1d4 hours, which pretty much made him have disadvantage on all of his attacks. So that kind of messed him up a lot. I eventually kind of told him what happened. Also, they never really resolved the issue with the unicorn. Over here, and they took the figurine that was kind of like corrupted and stuff, but they didn't actually break. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to break it, and when you broke it, the unicorn would like be cured or whatever and restored, and its spirit would appear and kind of bless everybody and heal everyone to full, which is a kind of a nice buff that would have been great for the final battle or for the race and stuff like that. But they never did do that. So what would have happened was 24 hours later, the unicorn would come back, appearing nearby where the figurine was. So essentially, the way the campaign kind of ended was they went to bed at Johnny's place, and then they heard the familiar. They heard the crackling of energy and the flashing, and then they heard the familiar evil unicorn outside, and they had to deal with that issue. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. As for any of there was a few side things I allowed for if they had done it. If they had went to the forest to the north, they could have helped out a little bit with Iria fighting undead. Also, if they had done enough searching, or if someone was a warlock that started in the village, I would have there would have been some information about getting a witch staying out in the forest, and if you had found that place, essentially she was just a warlock that would trade magic items and stuff like that. She wouldn't buy or sell them, but she would trade magic items. So she could, if the party wanted to like get rid of the harp, they could have traded it for some nice item or something like that. But that was pretty much all there was for that. We are still playing 5th edition, but it's been pretty slow. Addison, the person that plays as Johnny, is now our DM, and I've been playing as a paladin in that. Pretty much everyone's playing new characters except for Varus, who's kind of carried over, and we've just been going on from there. But overall, I really like 5th edition. 5th edition, I think it's an incredible improvement over pretty much every D20 system I've played so far. It does have, the ways I could describe it is kind of using words that are kind of taboo, like, simplified or very accessible. But in this case, I think they did it very, very right. Leveling up in 5th edition is very, very simple. It's literally just look at your chart and you get those things, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there's been some complaints that are completely misguided, where people are like, oh, well, if there's only 3 archetypes for fighter, which means if you play 3 different fighters, you've played all the fighters, which is probably the most ignorant statement I've kind of heard of any of them, because it doesn't really make any sense, because fighters originally had 0 archetypes, in which case play 1 fighter and you play them all. But that's not how it works. Usually the way fighters work is you have unique feats, and you have, unique style of weapon and stuff like that, which I think 5th edition does a really good job with, because there's the weapon styles, which you can use to be like, okay, well, I want to be a defensive sword and board type fighter, which, well, you can just become there's a specialization, there's a weapon style for that. But if you want to be a more offensive one, there's a style for that. And then there's, of course, two-handed, archery, all that good stuff. So you have the leveling system is simple, but like a lot of your choices are built into the system. So like at the start of fighter, you get to pick your weapon style, and then at 3rd level, you get to pick your archetype, which the archetype alone kind of opens a lot of doors, especially if you do things like, oh, well, I'm a arcane warrior now, which means I now have spells on top of my abilities, as well as these unique abilities that are more magic related. But yeah, I enjoy the flexibility of it. One of the things I liked about 3rd edition, 3.5, and Pathfinder was like, okay, if I had enough books, I could pretty much make any sort of character I can imagine. But in the case of 5th edition, all I need is the player's handbook, and I can essentially make majority of the things I could think of. And part of that is also because of multi-classing is really good in it, though we didn't really mess with it in this campaign, but I've looked into it, and it's pretty amazing. All the classes are pretty viable. There are some, that are a little bit unbalanced and things like that, but that's, it's not as bad as it used to be. I do like the fact that the numbers are a lot lower. You don't have to worry about getting plus 20 to attack at level 20 type things. It kind of scales a lot more reasonably, which makes everyone a little bit more viable in general, even as if you choose to focus on other things. The feats are less, but there's less feats, but they're all very, very powerful and very, very effective, where you can do some very unique combinations. For example, the paladin I'm playing is two-handed spec, which means I get to re-roll damage if I roll low on two-handed weapons. And I'm using a Hellbird, and I have polearm specialization as a feat. And what that does is it allows me to get reaction attacks when they enter my range rather than when they leave it. So that lets me get a free attack when people charge me. But then I also took Sentinel as my other feats, which lets me stop people's movement when I hit them with a reaction attack. So I essentially became a very unique crowd control kiter type character, where I can at least fend off one monster at a time and keep the party safe from at least one attacker pretty good. It's also very good at stopping people from running away. So I can just stop them from running and just keep, hitting them over and over again and things like that. So yeah, overall I really like the system and it's been a lot of fun. I apologize for missing not being able to show out the final two parts, but I kind of wanted to go ahead and put this video up so you guys can know what happened. To be honest, it was 2 videos long, but it probably should have just been 1 video. It just, turns take forever and explanation and all that. But overall, it was a lot of fun, and I hope to keep playing it, but as always, scheduling for Dungeons & Dragons has always been a pain. As for what I'll be doing for the other weekends, since this D&D stuff is over, I actually have finished recording a kind of a solo session of me playing a board game, kind of showing off the rules, and hopefully that'll be kind of fun. After that, I have another board game, which is going to be on Roll20, that I'll be showing off, and I'll probably be doing a campaign of that by myself, and kind of showing off that game as well. So there's still more stuff coming along the way, but as always, weekends are kind of my side projects, if anything. So as always, if nothing comes up on the weekends, that's probably because I've just been too busy working on other things. But thank you guys for watching. I hopefully you guys enjoyed this entire series, and I will see you guys later.